Welcome to this special episode featuring Yoon Mee and Vanessa from OCBC's GWB Sustainability Office. They'll be sharing insights on the recently published industry guidance for leveraging the Singapore-Asia Taxonomy in green and transition financing developed by the Singapore Sustainable Finance Association. As co-lead of the SSFA Taxonomy workstream, Yoon Mee and Vanessa were instrumental in developing and shaping this industry guidance. Thank you, Yoon Mee and Vanessa, for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
So, Yoon Mee, could you start by introducing the Singapore-Asia Taxonomy and explaining how it helps financial institutions engage clients in credible transition efforts?
Sure. So the Singapore-Asia Taxonomy, SAT in short, is a document defining green and transitional business activities essential for decarbonizing our industries. So what's clear to us is that those activities need funding, and bankers and investors are critical in bringing necessary capital for those projects. With that in mind, MAS published this document through an industry working group to offer consistent and data-based criteria so that we can finance them with confidence. OCBC has fully adopted the SAT for our own sustainable financing when it was published, and we're making a good progress there with some market-first taxonomy-aligned loans and bonds. By the way, we also have a dedicated podcast episode on taxonomy. Feel free to check it out if you're interested. Going back to taxonomy, it is critical in offering financing for green and transitional business activities. What I like to highlight today here is that taxonomies are far more than classification or labeling tools. They are powerful enablers. They help financiers speak the same language with the industry players so that we can have meaningful conversations about credible transition. By offering clarity and structure, they help shift focus from what's right to how, so we can prioritize our efforts in actions with real impact.
Moving on to the guidance that was published, what motivated SSFA to develop this guidance, and how does it support the industry in unlocking transition financing opportunities?
Let me introduce the SSFA first for the people who are not familiar with that. The Singapore Sustainable Finance Association, SSFA in short, is industry-led association established to coordinate and drive collaborations across the industries. Its mission is to support the development of a credible and vibrant sustainable finance market, positioning Singapore as a leading regional hub here. Taxonomy was one of the 5 areas that they identified as a key driver for this, and we're excited that OCBC is co-leading this interesting working group. The goal of this working group is to help and enable the industry to harness the full potential of transition opportunities using this taxonomy. For that purpose, we're providing training programs on taxonomies and its use cases. We'll also launch an FAQ site on taxonomy to help the industry players to better understand and use these 200-page, very technical documents in their daily client engagement. Last but not least, we developed this guidance. So speaking about this guidance, one of the standout features of the SAT was that it introduced a comprehensive set of amber categories for transitional business activities. This was a critical step forward, especially in markets like ours, where the need for credible transition financing is both urgent and growing. However, when we look at the market, there were limited transition financing activities. So to address this gap, we formed an industry working group by inviting bankers, investors, external reviewers, standard-setting bodies, to develop these practical, actionable guidelines that could help unlock more credible green and transition financing.
Zooming further into the guidance, Vanessa, can you walk us through the key components of the guidance document?
Sure. So the guidance can be broken down into 2 parts. The first part aims to clarify how to interpret and use the SAT. It also introduces some flexibility when applying the SAT, which we believe is really helpful for dealing with practical challenges on the ground. This first part covers things such as how to show alignment with what's called the technical screening criteria or eligibility criteria, especially when some required data is not available. It also explains how to navigate the amber category, which comes into play when the criteria gets stricter during the course of financing. Now, the second part of the guidance takes things a step further. It expands the scenario where financing an activity can be recognized as transition financing, but with important guardrails in place to maintain integrity and prevent greenwashing. So what this means is that even if an activity does not tick every single box of the relevant criteria in the SAT, it can still qualify for transition financing in certain cases. This second part covers things such as how activities can qualify for transition financing even when they are not able to meet 100% of the criteria due to things like regional, country, or industry-specific constraints that are simply beyond the borrower's control.
What are some of the main challenges faced by the industry in adopting the Singapore-Asia Taxonomy, and how does this guidance help address those challenges?
One of the key challenges that we are facing is definitely the lack of available data. For example, sometimes a project being financed is still in the design or construction phase, so there simply isn't any operational data available. However, the criteria can only be applied to operational data. Or a borrower might also be raising financing to acquire an asset that they do not currently own or manage, so they too will not have access to operational data. In other cases, the borrower might be higher up in the value chain and does not control the downstream operational data that the criteria focuses on. So how can we deal with this? The guidance suggests that financiers can rely on proxy data instead. What we recommend is to use data from internationally or nationally recognized databases that are considered credible in the relevant sectors. So think of sources like the Global Energy Monitor or the International Energy Agency for the energy sector, or the World Steel Association for the steel sector. On top of that, financiers can also rely on borrower attestation as a form of representation and warranty to address those data gaps. Another key challenge we face is applying the SAT to green or transition enabling and value chain activities. These activities are really important because they provide the products, services, and technologies that help other sectors to cut their greenhouse gas emissions. The guidance allows for green and transition financing for these enabling and value chain activities, but only if it's clear that they directly support eligible activities. Plus, financiers need to make sure that the activities they are funding do not block the development of low-carbon alternatives. They have to avoid what's called a carbon lock-in, which refers to a long-term dependence on high-emission technologies or infrastructure. So let's take, for example, offshore wind farms that generate wind energy, a renewable source of power. These wind farms are located out at sea and they require shipping vessels to transport materials and equipment required for their construction and maintenance. Today, ocean-going shipping vessels with zero tailpipe emissions are not viable, so they will not be able to meet the green criteria for shipping. However, if these vessels are exclusively dedicated to building or maintaining offshore wind farms, the activity can be seen to directly enable renewable energy development and can be recognized as a green activity by extension.
So with the publication of this guidance, what are your hopes for the future of green and transition financing in Singapore?
We hope that the practical tips offered in this guidance will enhance the usability of the SAT. Our goal is for more companies to leverage the SAT to articulate their green and transition efforts. That way, financiers, regulators, and the broader ecosystem can better support their transition journeys. We believe this tool can spark meaningful conversations about what it truly takes to transform industries for a low-carbon future and serve as a catalyst to direct more capital into transition efforts. And that's absolutely essential for our region and the world to reach net zero.
Thank you, Yoon Mee and Vanessa, for taking the time to join us for this insightful conversation on the Singapore-Asia Taxonomy and for sharing how the new guidance can support the industry in channeling capital towards meaningful transition initiatives in the region.